Welcome to Random Movie Reviews. I'm Nathan, and today I'll be talking about Abigail. Well, since I just did a joint review of both Near Dark and The Lost Boys just a few days ago, I figured why not finish up this trilogy of vampire reviews and talk about a vampire movie that came out this year, just a few months ago, one that I watched for the first time yesterday, and one that I thoroughly enjoyed. I feel like there's going to be a lot of parallels between this video and the video I did on Thanksgiving, the Eli Roth slasher movie, in that video, I specifically talked about wanting to bring back more fun, well-made, campy horror movies to kind of balance out the very slow, elevated, more depressing horror movies, you know, like the A24 films, and just kind of have more variety in mainstream horror. And Abigail and Thanksgiving, they're both good recent examples of films kind of filling in that void. This movie is fun. It is very tongue-in-cheek. It finds that perfect balance of being genuinely creepy and also genuinely funny. But I wouldn't call the movie an outright horror comedy, similar to that of Thanksgiving. Both movies have a lot of humor, but they know when to take the plot seriously. They know when to take the characters seriously. Specifically that in Abigail. I really like how the film establishes its characters, how the film gives them some layers, gives them some depth, and how you end up actually caring about the characters as the movie goes on, which creates some nice tension and some surprisingly heartfelt moments. I knew going into Abigail for the first time I was gonna probably like it because it was from the creative team Radio Silence. For those who don't know, Radio Silence is this film production company that has been known for making horror movies. Most famously, they're known for making the film Ready or Not, and more recently, the Scream movies, both Scream 5 and 6. And they just have that type of tone that I like in horror movies, where they're not afraid to get bloody, they're not afraid to get gory and over the top, and they're also not afraid to have fun with their horror movies. And this film feels very much in the same tone as Ready or Not. Both movies take place in a single location. That single location is being a very well constructed, awesome looking mansion. Their characters are trapped, and they're both essentially siege movies that take place in one specific location. You have to watch our characters survive. And both movies have an affinity for seeing people blow up. Like big bloody balloons. So that's a lot of fun. And the other big comparison to the movie Abigail that is pretty obvious is the movie From Dusk Till Dawn. Both movies start off as kind of crime thriller movies for about the first half. And then when you get into the second half, the movies very abruptly turn into vampire films. I don't want to suggest that Abigail is just a ripoff from Dusk Till Dawn. I mean, the premises of both films are pretty much the same. The execution of the films are very different. This movie has its own identity, its own sense of humor, its own sense of style. It has its own sense of vampire lore. This movie kind of messes around. They kind of create their own rules of how vampires work in this movie that was fun and interesting and that I really enjoyed. And I think everybody kind of agreed that at the time of this film's release, when it was being advertised, it was probably a mistake to reveal that it was going to be a vampire movie, because that twist would have been so much more satisfying if you hadn't seen it in literally every single trailer. But at the same time, it's like, I understood why they did that, because like, how do you sell this movie as being like a movie about criminals stealing a little girl and getting money back? Like, could they have done an advertising for that would have gotten people to see the movie? I don't really know. So it's one of those situations where it's like you're kind of selling the movie on the premise that it turns into a vampire movie, but you kind of shoot yourself in the foot when you reveal that. Regardless, it wasn't that much of a deal breaker, because obviously going into the movie, I knew it was going to become a vampire movie at probably the midway point, and I still had a lot of fun with it. This is probably the best vampire movie that's come out in years. Certainly better than Renfield, that terrible vampire movie with Nicolas Cage that was just really obnoxious and stupid and really just bland. That was a bland movie. Abigail is not a bland movie. It's so... I just love movies that are... I love siege movies. I love movies that take place in one location. You have to see these characters kind of work together. They have to puzzle solve things in order to get out of the situation. And the cast of this movie is fantastic. Dan Stevens is having fun. I think he's doing like kind of a Boston or maybe like a New England type of accent. It sounds good though, and he's a very dickish character, and he's clearly having a lot of fun. Melissa Barrera, who was both in the Scream movies, in both Scream 5 and 6. I wasn't really sold on her performance in those two movies or her character. I can't really get into that without revealing major spoilers for that. That'll be a video for another time. But in this movie, I really liked her a lot. Her character has a great backstory. She's an easy character to root for, to sympathize with. I always say a horror movie or a monster movie, which Abigail can be classified as both, is only as good as its victims. And if we don't care about the victims, or you know what I mean, or if you don't have at least one or two characters to root for, then the tension is kind of gone. But because we care about our lead character and her backstory, it's easy to root for her, and you really want to see her get out of this, and it's very satisfying, the conclusion of this movie. All the characters have great defining qualities that separate them from each other. They don't feel like your average just expendable characters. I mean, maybe one or two of them do. But the fact that the movie actually takes the time to develop them and give them their own unique characteristics, and the fact that they all play off each other so well is just great. And man, when this movie gets funny, it gets really funny.
Okay, what do we know about vampires?
That they're not real.
Pretty much all of the comedic attempts in this film worked for me. And I am not a cheap laugh, by the way. Like I said, I mentioned the movie Renfield earlier. That movie has the most bottom barrel, obvious, predictable jokes that you've seen in a million other movies done way better. Abigail is actually funny. At some points, it's even meta, the way it kind of comments on the vampires in media, which is kind of fun. Overall, it's just a really solid, enjoyable horror movie that, like I said earlier, it finds that perfect balance between being scary and wink wink at the audience, pulpy, campy, a little bit humorous. It's got a little bit of everything. It's not a perfect movie. I think my biggest gripe with the movie is that the third act of the film kind of drags on for way longer than it needs to. In fact, I think this movie probably would have benefited if it was a tight 95 minutes or so. The whole last act, it's not boring to watch. It's just like, okay, we're kind of doing the same thing over and over. I think it's time to wrap it up. But overall, man, both this and Thanksgiving both of those films are giving me hope for horror movies coming out in the future that aren't afraid to have fun. Like I said, I don't want the elevated horror movies to go away. I just want a balance. I want give us a variety. Give us a little bit of everything in horror, because the horror genre has a lot to offer. And yeah, I thoroughly recommend this movie, especially if you were a fan of Ready or Not. Both movies would be a perfect double billing back to back. They're so much fun. Yeah, this is just a really enjoyable movie. So if you guys have seen this movie before, comment down below. Tell me what you think of this movie. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What are some of your favorite vampire movies of all time? What would you like to hear me review next? And as always, thank you guys for watching.